My name's Kate Curtis. I am one of the volunteers here at the Miramar Prison Community Gardens on Matai Moana, Mount Crawford, which is up the far north end of the Miramar Peninsula in Wellington. We are lucky to be kaitiaki of these beautiful gardens that were left as after the Mount Crawford prison closed in 2012. So we know that the area of the gardens has been used to grow food for at least 130 years by prisoners. Before that, the Māori that made use of the pā sites around the area would have also grown food nearby. Something that's pretty special that we discovered not long ago was a line of karaka trees down the southern border of the gardens. There's a gigantic one up in the corner too that's really old. Now, karaka are not endemic, they're not native to Wellington. They've been brought in and they were cultivated as a food source by Māori. We've had advice from horticulturists at Zealandia that those karakas are most likely planted and cultivated by Māori in this area. So it's pretty cool that we've got this quite long history of growing food in this area. Wellington Prison, which is more commonly known as Mount Crawford, was built in 1927. The prisoners took over running this space, these gardens, to grow food for the prisoners. So it was used to produce vegetables, fruit from the trees, a lot of pumpkin. We have records of 300 pumpkins being grown one year. The prisoners got really sick of pumpkin at that point. The herbs were not all well loved by the prisoners. Some of them would complain about little bits of green grass in their gravy when the cooks tried to use the vegetables and the produce. But they ate pretty well for prisoners at that time. So when you look at the prison from the front entrance, there is a little door off to the left. It's sort of a half-sized door. That's the door that the bodies of deceased prisoners were taken out from. The most well-known of those was George Errol Coates. Now, if you've ever driven through the Mount Vic tunnel and heard people tooting their horns, they are tooting in remembrance of Phyllis Summers, who was murdered and her body was buried there by Coates. Now, Coates was imprisoned in Mount Crawford prison, and he was the first person to be executed by hanging in that prison in 1931. He maintained his innocence to the end, but the evidence was there to convict him. The most significant structure that's still in place today is Fort Balance. It was built in response to the perceived threat of the Russian invasion in the late 1800s. That site was built using prison labor as well as military labor. The other sites that are still visible are all of the structures that were used to house armaments as part of the army base that was here. We are lucky to be kaitiaki of these beautiful gardens that were left as after the Mount Crawford prison closed in 2012. The gardens are surrounded by the forest and regenerating bush of Watts Peninsula. Preserving and keeping green space and wild space, not just for the well-being of our people, but for the well-being of our native birds and animals and trees is important. To really get people to come in to the gardens and then explore the wider area and make great use of the nature that surrounds us.